Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to our third of 4 sessions focusing on disaster recovery, backup, and data protection. This is Planning Your IT Disaster Recovery and Improving IT Resiliency session with James Tantram. And we'll start with really introductions today. James Tantram, I'm the Director of Product Management here at Rogers Data Centers. Our mission is to really help Canadian businesses realize their full digital transformation potential by optimizing our clients' implementation of cloud, whether that's co-location, private cloud, virtual private cloud, or hyperscaler clouds, to really unlock the power of the cloud and achieve the right balance of cost, elasticity, control, while always remaining secure. I'm joined today by a special guest, Derek Adair. Derek is a Zerto cloud architect with over 20 years of experience in the IT industry. His focus is really around helping service providers craft, configure, and optimize their cloud-based disaster recovery solutions, leveraging the Zerto platform. He helps, obviously, through Zerto and through his efforts for customers to become more resilient in their IT. And outside of work, Derek really enjoys overlanding, guitar, cycling, and weekend trips out with his wife and 2 daughters around New England and Quebec. So as mentioned, this is our third of 4 sessions. You can find out about our final and upcoming session that really focuses on really the implementation of multi-cloud and hybrid IT. That information is available at www.rogers.com/DC events. So we'll jump right into things today. We've got a pretty straightforward agenda. We're really going to start with just a little bit of an introduction about what exactly disaster recovery is, how does it fit within the overall business continuity plan that many organizations are really looking at and reevaluating in light of COVID-19. We'll explore really 2 key topics and concepts that really help formulate businesses define their disaster recovery and their business continuity plans. And that's the concept of recovery point objective and recovery time objectives, really 2 acronyms that are really paramount to understand in crafting a disaster recovery strategy. We'll spend a little bit of time just helping organizations begin to craft a perspective and a methodology for just understanding, what are some of the impacts of downtime when it comes to IT infrastructure, and then really how does Rogers help our clients and our customers formulate that comprehensive business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. And then I'm really going to hand it over to Derek. Derek, as mentioned, comes from Zerto. Zerto is one of Rogers' key technology partners that helps bring our disaster recovery technology and products to market. Zerto is an industry leader in the disaster recovery as a service domain. And what Derek will give us is a really good perspective just in terms of how Zerto technology helps organizations improve their overall IT resiliency. So business continuity planning, what exactly is it, and how does this disaster recovery plan sort of fit into that business continuity planning process? And really, to summarize, a business continuity plan looks at all components of an organization when it comes to delivering products and services and really all of the functions of the business. And business continuity plan will look at people, processes, systems. It'll address sort of risk management, understanding the implications of losing specific individuals or specific functions and so forth, and really is comprehensive across the entire business. A disaster recovery plan traditionally looks at the systems components of the business. And so really from an information technology standpoint, the disaster recovery plan captures in the event of a disruption of a server site or an IT application, how is that application going to be brought back online? How quickly will that application be brought back online? And what will be sort of the impact of that application's downtime to the organization? When we look at really from a business perspective, what have organizations typically prepared for when it comes to disaster recovery? There's two scenarios that businesses have tend to place a lot of focus and effort around solving for. The first one has really been around the loss of an office site. And so typically this is an office closed, perhaps due to fire or because of flooding or some event of that nature, where employees are simply not able to access that single location. And so businesses have generally put into place plans that ensure that staff that work out of that location can continue to function. And that may involve going to an alternative site or perhaps working from home from a short period of time. But generally, a reasonably predictable and simple problem to solve. The other disaster recovery scenario that organizations have focused on has really been around failure of an IT system, a traditional IT outage. And so this may be a result of just simply a site failure, the power going out, or a server failing from a hardware perspective. Perhaps a change has gone south in terms of updating infrastructure, and so a change management process is being followed. And so, again, generally a lot of emphasis has been placed in solving for that IT outage scenario. Of course, COVID presented something that many organizations in Canada were not necessarily prepared for. And what we've seen through COVID was effectively, especially in the early phases back in March, when we had really the majority of employees no longer able to perform their roles and functions from the office, transitioning to a work from home environment. And what's very interesting with COVID is if we look at sort of the conditions that organizations have been facing, is it has been really a monitor the situation, understand how some of the risks are evolving, and then update that business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan almost in real time. And so if we think of just some of the key events and milestones of COVID, we initially had restricted access to sites, whether that was in the interest of employee safety, or in many parts of the country, we were facing the prospect of shelter-in-place orders. And in fact, given that we're entering the second wave of COVID, some of those restrictions are potentially coming back into place. We had to manage essentially risks and scenarios where we no longer could dispatch staff to business sites to perform routine IT maintenance and tasks. We've had obviously disruptions where key employees have been quarantined and remained, forced to remain at home for 14 days. And then we have seen in many cases and continue to see supply chain disruption. And of course, I would say that the main headwind that we're facing today is really in the technical services realm, where restrictions on cross-border travel, as well as just the desire to keep key IT resources sort of protected and healthy, is really limiting many organizations' capability to deploy technical services on site. And so these are really some of just the key events that we've been dealing with over the past little while. And what we'll explore today is just how do technologies like Zerto really help organizations overcome uncertainty in their ability to operate and manage IT environments. One of the things that will really help us today in just understanding disaster recovery is really a good level set and understanding in terms of what is the difference between backup and backup services and disaster recovery services. And one way I like to look at this in terms of the different sort of roles that each of these services provide is that when we think of backup, think of a backup in the context of copying the files from your laptop or from your desktop onto a USB stick, and then securing and placing that USB stick in sort of a secure vault that in the event that you've got a loss of data or a corruption of data, you can go back to a point in time, recover a specific copy or a specific USB stick, and essentially recover those files. That contrasts very differently to disaster recovery, where the analogy or context here is imagine having really two identical laptops or desktops that are sitting next to each other, and the data and changes on the laptop that you're working on is instantly replicated and copied to that second laptop. And what really helps now is to just think about different events, different situations where one of these solutions is perhaps more preferable to the other. And we'll start with perhaps the laptop example. And so imagine you're working away on a document, you've got a deadline at the end of the day, and suddenly the laptop that you're working on powers off and you can't get it started again. That disaster recovery scenario where you've got that second identical laptop means that in a matter of seconds, you can pick up that second laptop and essentially pick up where you left off on your files, on the documents that you were working on. And so that's going to allow you to very quickly get back up and running and really have continuity in terms of being able to meet SLAs and meet deadlines, because you're really not facing a prolonged outage on that failure. The scenario where a point-in-time backup or that USB stick really comes in handy is, imagine that you've opened an important file and you want to use that file as a template to create a new document. And so you start working on that new document, you're working on it for a couple of hours, and then you decide, oh, I need to save that document. But instead of hitting Save As and creating a new file, you save over that old important file. And this is something that almost all of us have done. And if you think of that disaster recovery application, well, going to that second laptop, to that sort of instantaneous copy of your current work state isn't going to help you, because that second laptop will have already saved over that critical file. The way you recover from this type of scenario is going back to that point in time before you started that new document, before you saved over that important document, find that USB stick that had that important file and recover that document. And so, when I talk to clients and customers around, well, what is the right solution for me? Virtually always, no matter what the nature of a workload is, you're going to require a backup service. And with the malware and ransomware that's going around these days, it's so important to be able to have that point-in-time copy to allow you to go back and recover files prior to that malware, prior to that event occurring. When it comes to disaster recovery, this is really to protect applications from downtime. So for workloads that, when they go offline, really have an impact on productivity, have an impact on customer satisfaction, those are the workloads that really require that real-time disaster recovery. And so for many critical workloads, both solutions are required in order to protect against slightly different scenarios that impact an application and impact availability of data. So I'm hoping that's a good explanation in terms of just how disaster recovery and backup as a service complement each other. Now that we've got those concepts, it's really good to put them into the context of recovery point objective and recovery time objective. Because when we're engineering and designing a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan, these two variables really dictate the type of technology solution that is required. And so to put things very simply, the RPO, or the recovery point objective, really defines how much data can you actually afford to lose when you need to recover. And so the recovery point objective really deals with how frequently are you making those point-in-time copies. And that can vary from literally milliseconds. And a recovery point objective of milliseconds would be really critical for financial transactions, as an example, where the cost or the implication of losing a bank transfer or a stock transaction is just such an imperative that data be retained. So recovery point objectives in those scenarios are milliseconds. From a document perspective and from a desktop perspective, maybe a recovery point objective of a day or a week is fine, meaning I'm willing to afford, or I'm willing to accept that I might lose up to a week of work or a day's work on a laptop. And of course, you're going to see all kinds of scenarios from a workload perspective that fit between those two bookends. The recovery time objective, the RTO, on the other hand, really speaks to how quickly an application or a workload needs to be back up and running. And again, this really depends on the nature of a workload. If we're looking at those financial type systems, if we're looking at authentication and critical business applications, recovery time objective is typically measured in minutes or in hours. Most of us are familiar with the concept of a 4-hour timed repair sort of being the industry standard for a reasonably quick recovery time objective. But there's many workloads where, perhaps we can go longer, right? And when we think about desktop support and perhaps, a printing application, for many businesses, recovery time objective may be measured in days. And just simply we can afford to go without that particular application for some time. And so it just, when it comes to business continuity planning and disaster recovery, really looking at all of your specific business applications and really setting and understanding, well, how much data can I afford to lose for this application? Meaning, how frequently do I need to be backing it up? And if it was to go down, how quickly would I want to recover that application? Those are really the two simple questions to ask when starting to craft a business continuity plan. And then just to sort of help further refine perhaps the thinking on that evaluation, it's very helpful to think of, from a recovery time objective and a recovery point objective, just, what is the cost of downtime? And here's just a really simple example where we've taken an organization that, in this specific example, is transacting about $100 million annually on a business application. And so when we think of $100 million annually, what that equates to is, on an hourly basis, assuming that the transactions are pretty consistently spread across the year and the days and the hours, the cost of downtime is about $10,000 hourly. And so if we start thinking about a recovery time objective and a recovery point objective, if we were down for 24 hours, meaning if it takes us 24 hours to recover data, or we lose 24 hours of data, then we're really looking at a cost of downtime for this application of about $240,000, $270,000. If we can reduce that RPO down to a matter of hours, let's take that 4-hour time to restore objective. Well, then we're losing about $40,000 in terms of transactions or cost. And then if we really look at a near instantaneous recovery time objective, where that application can be brought back up in a matter of seconds, and only a few seconds of data are lost, then we're looking at downtime that's measured in literally the thousands of dollars. And so again, depending on how critical $100 million is to your business, that's really going to help define how stringent those RPOs and RTOs need to be. One other concept that I would like to introduce, and it just is very relevant given the current situation with COVID, is we tend to stratify digital transformation, which is the concept of adopting digital technologies in order to be more agile, more innovative, more responsive to customer needs, and ultimately to attain a competitive advantage. We tend to differentiate or distinguish that digital transformation initiative from data protection and IT resiliency. And what we're seeing, certainly from a market and from a customer standpoint, is that the two concepts go hand in hand. And what I mean when I say that is, digital transformation, in essence, is about being faster, and it is about being more responsive. And with that, IT becomes, a much more sort of dynamic and evolving component to the enterprise. And of course, as we know, in any situation, when we're making frequent changes to IT systems and IT applications, it means we're in a constant state of change management. And a key pillar of change management is really that backup and essentially rollback plan. And data protection services can really help organizations mature their change management processes by getting very effective and very quick rollback and recovery capabilities. And what that allows a business to do essentially is be able to update and evolve their IT systems without necessarily the concerns and risk aversion that comes with the sense or knowledge of not being able to recover or back out those changes. And so we really recommend at the heart of any digital transformation sort of initiative is that there is a core data protection sort of foundation that's in place in order to allow these digital transformation initiatives to be successful. And then we're just about ready to move into the sort of technical element of today's presentation and going really deep on the Zerto technology. From a Rogers perspective, there are really three key data protection products that we bring to market in support of really cloud-based backup. We work with Veeam to provide what's known as the Cloud Connect service, which allows users of Veeam to target our data centers as a secure cloud-based repository for their Veeam implementations. Today, we're really talking about the Zerto and the Disaster Recovery as a Service product and capability that Rogers has. This is really about enabling applications no matter where they are, whether they're in your own data center, in a Rogers data center, or even in a hyperscaler environment, to be able to really instantaneously recover in the event of an infrastructure failure. And then we do have an object store capability that really works with leading backup software to allow organizations to target our data centers as a cloud-based S3 repository, really an alternative to the Amazon S3 service. And a couple of reasons why we believe Rogers is a great place for Canadian businesses to host their cloud-based data protection services. First, we are a leader in the data center industry, really around Canadian compliance and Canadian sovereignty. So our data centers are built to Tier 3 standards, which essentially independently verifies our data centers to 100% uptime. We are very rich on our compliancy. Our data centers come with embedded SOC, ISO, and HIPAA capabilities. We know the importance of protecting personal data in Canada. We are data sovereign. We could have a whole follow-up session in terms of what it means to be data sovereign, what it means to have data within a Canadian legal jurisdiction. But essentially, if you want to ensure your data is protected and governed by Canadian privacy laws, it's our belief that you need to be working with a Canadian cloud provider. It's not sufficient for your data just to be within Canada. Data is governed by where your cloud provider is incorporated and where they do business. And for the most part, that is the United States. US law means that their law applies to data even if it's stored outside of the US. And so something that we believe is very important for Canadian businesses to understand. All of our services come with service and support sort of embedded into the product. Talked about our mission statement at the beginning of the presentation to really help Canadians be successful in their cloud journey and with respect to their digital transformation initiatives. That requires really a customer focus that ensures that the cloud that you're landing on is best optimized to your specific business needs. And finally, something very important is that there are no surprise fees and costs with Rogers Cloud. We never charge egress fees, which is something that many organizations are really struggling with in the cloud, is those unexpected charges for accessing and moving data. And when it comes to data protection, this is key because you're not paying your cloud provider to back up your services and data. You're paying your cloud service provider to ensure that your data is recoverable and does have integrity. And so with Rogers, you can validate your data is recoverable. You can validate the integrity of your data at any time without cost. And that just is such an important component to being able to succeed when it comes to cloud-based data protection. So with that, Derek, I'm going to hand it over to you And let's go deep in terms of the Zerto technology.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. That was a great overview. I've been working with Rogers for the past 2 years. We've built out this solution. It's very successful in the marketplace. I want to point out that Zerto is the IT resilience platform, so it's sort of a futuristic type concept at this moment in time, I think, in Canada. But as we look at what the driving forces are behind why we want to get to this point, you can kind of see on this slide, there's the traditional outages and disruptions, which we basically founded the company to protect from, to protect your data. This has led us to other areas, though, as we've gone on to see what the market has brought to us. We have grown with the market. We have validated certain areas of the market with our product. You can see what we do against ransomware with our journal, which is very granular and get down to very specific points in time. By doing that, you're going to be able to avoid, obviously, paying the ransomware. We have customers that have recovered multiple times from ransomware, never paid it, and that's just a good investment, right? To make sure that you are prepared for a ransomware attack. Canada is really on fire right now with those. So it's something that you need to be aware of and need to have that business continuity plan that Rogers can assist you with so that you can have complete data protection, right? Fulfill your data retention policies. Having converged disaster recovery and backup with Rogers, they can provide you with one solution to be able to take care of all your needs. Going from CapEx to OpEx, you don't need a second or third data center when you can use Rogers for DRAS. We have a one-to-many capability so that you can migrate and protect at the same time. So when we look at the consolidations and migrations that are going to be happening in the market over the next year or two, because of everything that's happened, migrations are very expensive typically. When you have Zerto to perform the migrations, not only are they less expensive, your OpEx costs go down because it's much easier to perform the actions and tasks that you need to. Testing and DevOps obviously is something that's been very hot for a number of years. We give you a testing bed so that you can perform patching. You can test any upgrades that you might perform. You can see that all in a live environment outside of production. And then cloud integration and migration. This has been something that's come along in the past few years. Zerto has the capability to get you in and out of any cloud. Speaking to what James spoke about with data sovereignty, you kind of decide as Canadian citizens whose dream you want to build. Do you want to build Jeff Bezos's dream? Do you want to build Bill Gates's dream? We have a Canadian, service provider here that has an excellent solution that has data sovereignty, which, like James said, we could do a whole nother session on that and the importance of having your data governed by Canada and not being open to discovery in the United States. Also, just the flexibility, right? Rogers has the capability, if anyone's made the mistake that they feel is a mistake and gone into a hyperscaler and they don't want to be there, they have the services and capabilities to get you out. The other thing that I will add in working with Rogers solution architects, Michael DeFabio, Phil Goulet, Shahad, George, they are all excellent at coming into your environment and sizing it, doing it very efficiently, and providing you with output that's going to help you understand your environment better and also help you build that business continuity plan that's going to help keep you protected when something goes down in your environment, when there's ransomware, and then also all the proactive capabilities that I'm going to talk about, including that multi-cloud hybrid cloud, being able to move while protecting, having analytics across all your sites and clouds. So if you look at the totality of what we're doing here, that's IT resilience. We're not talking about the 3-2-1 backup rule. We're going to have 3 fully restorable production copies in 3 separate locations. So continuous IT transformation is kind of where we are in the marketplace. We always want to be on at this point. There's not any time where it's okay for us to be down at this time or this other time. That's sort of a thing of last decade. Right now, we need to be on 24/7. We need to be protected. We need to be able to restore quickly, granularly. Zerto gives you that capability. If we look at what the situation is without IT resilience, you're running into cost overruns. You're going to have delays in achieving your cost savings. You could be pinned to a storage array, 2 years and 10 months down the road where you can't innovate because you're stuck and you haven't been able to free yourself from the chains of the physical environment. So using DRaaS with Rogers is sort of a toe dip where you build that trust, you understand what their capabilities are, and then when that is something that's proven for you, then you move your production capabilities into the cloud as well with Rogers, and then suddenly here you are in the 2020s and you're ahead of the game and ahead of everyone else. So if we look at what we're doing, we're removing systemic risk. We want to converge and automate. So our automation and orchestration is built into our platform with the replication. So it's not multiple point products that we're bringing into your environment. We're bringing in one software solution. We're not asking you to provide any hardware. So this is something that you can use with any storage array. We're storage agnostic. So as we talked about with the acquisitions, if you have an acquisition and you now have 3 or 5 different manufacturer storage arrays and you want to consolidate those, Zerto is the solution for that. You can do that migration. You can also stay protected while you do it. So that's a huge value, and also just having the capability to be able to migrate when you want to, as opposed to having to pay for, a $40,000 professional services engagement because you had the foresight to think ahead, to know that you might want to move your data at some point in the future, and you're not someone that's going to go into the public cloud without a plan to come out of the public cloud, right? Because anything that you're going to do, you're going to want to have a contingency plan, particularly with cloud. So we are accelerating the journey to cloud for customers. Not everyone wants to go fully to cloud, but just about everyone does now have some type of cloud mandate in their organization, and they are moving towards cloud. Now, what I would say is that we're moving towards provisioning to the application. So whatever cloud is going to be the best for any particular application, I think that's the future, and that's where we're headed. Right now, we're still relatively monolithic in the data center. We do break out our mission critical data. We break out our tiers of data. But moving forward, you're going to see we're going to increase agility by intelligently placing workload anywhere. So that's going to be, like I said, the application. If you're on-prem, if you're in Rogers Cloud, if you want the capability to go out into any of the other clouds we support, they can support you in that mission. And then, of course, achieving efficiency so that you have aligned and optimized resources. And then once all these things are in place, once you have all these capabilities, you have that 24/7 experience, you have that continuous transformation, and then you're able to innovate at the pace of business, and you're not tied to the technology that's pinning you back when you want to move forward. Okay, so this is a look at the architecture. It's very simple in terms of installing into your environment. Excuse me. You see here we have the production site on the left, and I'm just going to build out the slide, bear with me. Okay, so we have what we call our Zerto Virtual Manager, and that's a one-to-one relationship with the hypervisor management component. So that can be vCenter, that can be SCVMM. We support the top 2 hypervisors in the world. So if you have those, then we can go back and forth. We can do cross-hypervisor replication. If you have Hyper-V and you're finding that it doesn't have the features and functionality that you need, you can move to VMware. If you have Hyper-V and you want robust protection, you can protect from Hyper-V to VMware. If you're on VMware and the costs are too high, or for some other reason you'd like to move to Hyper-V, we can do that as well. We can cross over into the cloud as well. So there's a lot of capabilities that we provide you that are what I would call future-proofing capabilities. So we drop in our Zerto Virtual Manager, one per site. We have what's called our virtual replication appliance that runs on scale-out architecture. That's our data mover. We have one per ESXi host. So we go on each host. We're not going on each VM with an agent. We're not leveraging snapshots. We're not impacting production. We're not asking you to have any amount of storage on the production side other than these components, unless you want to have a local copy, which will be available in the next release. So it's a very lightweight, simple install. And when you work with Rogers Solution Architects, they're going to come in and they're going to install that Zerto Virtual Manager in your environment. They're going to pull the metrics of your rate of change for your data, and then they're going to understand your storage requirements, your pipe, your rate of change for your data, and they're going to use that to give you a wonderful presentation that shows you how you're going to be protected, what the capabilities are of the solution, and it's something that I just recommend that you talk to your Rogers SA about and have them come in and look at your environment. So if we look at what it looks like on the other side, we can see the BCDR site, the secondary site, we can call it. That site obviously can be your second site, that can be your third site, that can be the Rogers data center, all as part of one package with the one-to-many, so they can give you the capability to be able to replicate to their site, your other site, and locally. With the one-to-many feature. So that is really giving you very robust protection, being able to take one virtual machine and protect it in 3 different locations. So you can survive a double outage. It's a level of protection that gives a lot of people peace of mind. People are worried about their brand, their reputation, and everything else that goes along with failing at protecting yourself from ransomware. You can see the articles in the newspaper. You can see it all over LinkedIn every day. All these companies are getting blown up by ransomware, and if they're not prepared, there's consequences, right? We saw Las Vegas school system in the United States. They refused to pay the ransom, and they released all the students' data onto the internet. So there are consequences. It's something that you want to be prepared for. You don't want to, if you're an IT administrator, you don't want to have to call up the CEO crying because you can't get everything going again, and it's going to cost $50, $70, $100,000. Who knows what they're asking for these days? But it's a lot cheaper to think about it on the front end and take care of it on the front end. So the continuous data protection, the checkpoints in seconds, recovering anywhere to anywhere, no impact production and testing. Again, block level, continuous data protection, asynchronous, no snapshots, no agents, and the ease of operation is excellent. Everything is done on the front end. So Rogers will come in, we'll set everything up. It will be preordained what's going to happen upon failover. So when that failover time does actually come, everything will be in place. So that's, sort of, if you look at the name Zerto, it's sort of zero RTO that it's based on. Obviously, zero RTO is perfectly impossible, but with our low RPOs and our automation and orchestration, we're as close to zero RTO as you can get. So when you're looking at the RPO, we're talking seconds for us. It's anywhere from 3 to 15 seconds in any of the environments that I look at. One of the things that I would also add is that Zerto sells to NASA, and Zerto sells this multi-tenancy solution to NASA, and it's the same one that Rogers uses and would provide to you. So that always gives me a sense of warm fuzziness when any company sells to NASA and is successful. So the most important thing I want to point out is our journal, right? Our journal lives on the secondary site. So all the changes are coming down. We're intercepting them, sending them over via VPN, and it's getting written down to disk, right? So on the recovery site, we have this disk, which will logically represent our journal, and our journal is the front end of the data stream. So the new data is coming over, it's sitting in the journal. That journal can be up to 30 days. So if there is some incident that happens, and you get hit with ransomware and you don't find out for 2 weeks, you can have a 2-week journal, you can have a 3-week journal, whatever, you feel the risk is, you can cover that with Zerto. And that is really probably the biggest differentiator when you look at other products and what they can do. Being able to have a 30-day journal, being able to have, incremental 5-second checkpoints to be able to restore to, those are really strong value propositions that we have. All right, so these are sort of the product features that we talk about, but 4 key advantages: best of breed hypervisor replication, native agentless for continuous availability of the business. I think that's probably the most important thing. The journaling technology that we talked about to rewind and resume to any point in time. Ensuring your applications are recovered as one entity. So we have what's called a virtual protection group, which traditionally may have been known as a consistency group, where we're able to take VMs and put them into these envelopes and protect them together and restore them to a single point in time. If we look at enterprise applications, it's not a single monolithic VM that's running an entire application. There's multiple applications multiple VMs inside that application, and we want to be able to restore all those VMs to the same point in time, because that application needs to be at the same point in time to bring it back up. Now, if you're doing that with backups, with snapshots, you could be looking at 24 hours, you can be looking at 4 hours. With our journal, you're looking at, okay, this is where I got hit. I can see where the hockey stick is happening in analytics. I'm going to restore to 5 seconds before that point, and suddenly it's high fives instead of how are we going to pay for this? So the last point that I would point out is just our simplicity. It's very easy to use the product on any platform, so it's the same look and feel no matter where you are in Zerto. It's a very important concept. We don't give you a bag of doorknobs to manage each platform or each place that you'd like to go. So the replication, obviously, for DRAS, you're going to replicate to a Rogers Tier 3 data center. Those are all on Canadian soil, as we mentioned. We're going to fully automate the entire failover and failback process. That's done beforehand. You're going to be able to do non-disruptive DR testing, where you can, as I said, take care of all the benefits that you get from being able to have that testing bed. Storage agnostic replication, cloud agnostic replication. The ability to move your data anywhere that you want to without having to plan for a year to be able to do so. Location and hypervisor agnostic. We can put your data anywhere in the world, really. You'll be able to know where it is as well with our analytics. And then, of course, being able to recover to any point in time. I mean, these are all sort of bread and butter features that, have put us on the map, have made us the strongest solution in Canada for people that really care about their data and understand the value. This is the solution. Everyone is looking at the solution. It is a premium solution, so it's not for everyone, but I find that every customer wants to see it, to understand it, and I invite you to take a look, with the Rogers essays at the business case builder, because we will show you what the return on investment is on the product, what the cost of downtime is, and it's going to help you build your case. So if we look at this slide, this is really a value proposition slide. We have a lot of different ways to present what our value is. This is a look at the platform itself, right? You can see on the bottom the continuous data protection, which is what we were founded on. It's the RPO in seconds, which recoverability and how you recover really matters. So, as much as the RPO does matter, how you're going to recover and the efficacy of that process and what your, the people that actually perform the duties are going to feel like performing those duties. It's important to look deeply at Zerto and understand the real deep OpEx values that we provide. But in terms of just the continuous data protection, we are hypervisor level, so we brought replication out of the storage level, and that's why we're agnostic. We scale out so we can grow with any environment. We have service providers with tens of thousands of VMs at this point. The no impact is huge, right? No impact on production. Why would you want to impact your production with snapshots? It's just not a good idea. So we offload that to the secondary site. We don't have to worry about that cost. We have our application consistency grouping that I talked about. So we have multi-VM consistency. If we want to recover that entire application as a virtual protection group, we can. If we want to take all the VMs except one, or take one VM and recover it out of that virtual protection group, we can. We can provision to the VM or to the virtual protection group when we're talking about networking or storage. So there's all sorts of granular flexibility that's been built into the product. So we're not just provisioning to the application. We can also provision to the VM. We have that flexibility so that whatever the customer's needs are, and I found that as many customers as I talk to, that's how many needs there are. We can get them to the place that they want to go, which is, flexibility, which is data protection, freedom from lock-in, having the power in relationships with your vendors. That's really something that Zerto helps you define. So journal-based recovery, I think I've done that one to death. That is, a great strength of ours. And then we look at the next layer, right? Multi-cloud, having continuous data protection, being able to protect to the Rogers cloud, workload mobility, being able to move your data back and forth. Maybe you run DRAS to Rogers Cloud and you find out that Rogers Cloud has better performance than your own on-prem equipment, and then you can flip that equation around and run your production out of the Rogers data center and have your on-prem be the recovery site. So we've definitely seen that in the past, you know, on less performant, you know, tail end arrays. So that workload mobility builds into the multi-cloud message, and then of course being non-disruptive with our testing, you can test during a boot storm on Monday morning and we're not going to impact production. So we have that capability. You don't have to shut down on weekends to be able to do disaster recovery testing anymore. You know, we can run that test, like I said, Monday morning during a boot storm. And then around that, we have the orchestration and automation. So that's the layer that's extra. When you look at the products that have competed against us, oftentimes it's either orchestration and automation or replication. Now there's some that have the orchestration, automation, and the replication, but do closely look at the journal, do closely look at whether it's continuous block level replication, because really it matters what the process is and how it's done to be able to be truly protected and to be able to properly restore. You know, obviously having Rogers in your corner to be able to handle these restores is something that is really priceless. To have that one throat to choke, to be able to have a partner that you can point the finger at if anything goes wrong. You know, it really takes all the pressure off of you, whoever you are watching, you know, whether you're CXO level, whether you're at administrative level or somewhere in between. You know, Zerto is really a product that if you talk to the customers that use it, they will sell you on the value better than I can because they're using it every day. They're using it proactively and not just for, you know, the disaster recovery propositions that we've always had. You know, we obviously are the best at that, but we've also enabled all these capabilities into the product that give you, you know, that IT resilience and capability to restore, move, and protect just about anywhere. So speed, agility, and resilience, obviously incredibly important to anyone these days. We are not going to interfere with any of that, right? We're going to help you accelerate growth. So you're going to want to do modernization, cloud consolidations, all these acquisitions that are going to be happening over the next few years. You know, we can help you accelerate the growth. We can help you align the resources. We can help you get to an OpEx model, you know, from a CapEx model with a ton of OpEx expenses, which is probably where a lot of people are now. In terms of where does that take us, you know, that takes us to the automation of recovery. So we're protected against outages, failures, ransomware, natural disaster, user errors. So all the, you know, reactive uses for the product that we've always had. And, you know, these are our three pillars, right? Continuous availability, protection from outages and disruptions, workload mobility for infrastructure refresh and migrations, and then multi-cloud agility, being able to support all the clouds that we do, and then of course having the Rogers Cloud, you know, as your core location to be able to put your DRES. And with that, I will hand it back to you, James, for this pretty incredible.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Derek. So one of the things, just in giving back a little bit, because I think you know, we really recognize the impact that the last 6 months has had on really IT organizations. And so one of the offers we're really pleased to present to the market through to the end of the year, so until December 31st, is we are offering 50% off our disaster recovery as a service product, really built on the Zerto technology and value proposition that Derek has walked us through today. And of course, the way Rogers brings this to market is it's not just the software and the technology, which is of course critical to the solution, but it is the data center infrastructure, the servers, the network, and of course the expertise that allows organizations to be successful in the implementation of that business continuity plan. So we've got a couple minutes here for Q&A. I'm going to invite our moderator onto the bridge, Samiti. Samiti, do you want to let us know if you've got any questions on the bridge?
Yes, we do. Thank you, James and Derek. Our first question is, how do you determine the right recovery time objective and recovery point objective for different applications? Shouldn't they all be recovered as quickly as possible?
So yeah, I'll give really the, you know, high level view, and then Derek, maybe you can help just color that a little bit. And I think just it really boils down to the criticality of a specific workload. And I think, of course, the desire would be, hey, every workload, every application can recover instantaneously. the reality is, what we ask organizations to do is really to prioritize and triage their workloads. And so it does boil down to, from an investment standpoint, what workloads are absolutely critical, which are the ones that we can't afford to be without downtime, and then obviously what is the cost to sufficiently protect that workload and environment from downtime, because that ultimately, as you move up and tighten those RPOs and RTOs, the cost of the technology generally will increase.
Yeah, that's, for RPOs, we're always best effort. So you don't set our RPOs, our SLAs are our journal length, right? So it's always going to be as few seconds as possible for us to be able to get that data across the wire. So, you'll work with Rogers to prioritize your workloads and decide how those should be protected.
Thank you. Our next question is, can Rogers size my environment for me for disaster recovery as a service?
Yeah, sure.
I can answer
great
that.
Question again, and I think just...
Sorry.
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've worked very closely with the solution architects at Rogers. I invite you to get in touch with your salesperson to get them on site for you, or meeting over the phone as it is now, to kind of understand your environment. It's a relatively low touch engagement, but what you're going to get from it is, some really powerful knowledge about your environment, and, you may learn something that you can fix in your environment from the engagement, in addition to what you're going to do for disaster recovery.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Can we still do physical backups? I know you can quickly do a snapshot, but to be on the paranoid side, is there a way to restore from media?
Yeah, I could take that one. And I think again, when we introduce the concept of backup and disaster recovery as a service, we believe the two do complement each other. And I think one of obviously the benefits of Zerto was that journaled approach, which does give you sort of those multiple point in time recovery options. But there is generally going to be a life cycle associated with those recovery point objectives. And what we see organizations really adopting is almost a two-tier model when it comes to data protection, where they're leveraging the journaling, they're leveraging those recovery point objectives that sit in the disaster recovery sort of platform. But for really long-term compliance needs, right? If you're particularly in a regulated industry, transportation, financial services, healthcare, you have a requirement to ensure that data is archived and recoverable 7 years, and in many instances for the lifetime of that data, so lifetime sort of retention. And so a traditional offsite or even a tape backup archival platform is really the way that organizations are achieving their compliance needs. And so the two, as mentioned, they work together, right? Okay, we're just at the top of the hour, so I think we are going to wrap things up. Samiti, thank you for those questions, and Derek, thank you for participating today. Great insight into the technology. Do remind everyone that we have our fourth and final session coming up next week, and you can learn more about that at rogers.com/DC events. Thank you very much.